And now let's do some ratios. Remember we talked a lot about days receivable, days in inventory, and days payable. Let's go grab those numbers. So I'm going to want receivables, inventory, and payables in that order. And so receivables was here. Inventory was row 82, and payables were 85. Equals E82 equals E85. Save you a little bit of scrolling right there. And then the cash conversion cycle says that it's how long it takes you to get paid plus how long you have to leave your stuff in inventory less how long you get to wait to pay your bills. So that's how long it takes us to get $1 converted into cash. And we can copy that one forward. And had we changed those drivers upstairs, then we could see, what effect was it making on our overall cash conversion time. Very common approach in private equity to say if we can spend less time in inventory, if we can spend less time waiting to get paid, or if we can spend more time waiting to pay our own bills, then how does that affect our days to convert $1 into cash? Another very common look is the DuPont analysis. It takes 3 metrics and combines them into return on equity and helps us understand what's driving our return on equity. The first metric is net income over sales. So let's go all the way up to the income statement for that and take net income over sales. And what that says is for every $1 that we sell, 17 cents ends up on the bottom line for net income. What about turnover? This says sales over average total assets. So sales divided by average total assets. And this says for every $1 in total assets, how much sales can we generate per year? And 41 cents. If we multiply those two together, and remember your grade school math here, this is where net income times sales, net income over sales, times sales over average total assets. These sales cancel out, and we get net income over average total assets. And that says not only how much sales do we generate per total assets, but here, how much net income, how much profit do we generate for each $1 in total assets? And then we can look at one more. What's the average total assets? Let me cheat and see that total assets was on D60 and E60. So average of D60 and E60 divided by the average equity. We'll pull that off the balance sheet. Total equity at the beginning and the end of the current year with the right parentheses. And that says that we've got a fair amount of leverage here. If we didn't have any debt, then our total assets would equal our total equity, and that multiplier would be 100%. But what this does is it leverages the return on assets to get us to a return on equity much higher. Now, I multiplied these two. I think the formula says to multiply this and that. Obviously, it's the same thing. So even though we're only generating 7 cents per $1 of asset, we're generating 18 cents per $1 of equity. So we're using debt to leverage our performance there. So let's copy those with a Control R. See if any of that's changing over time. Well, it looks like it is changing over time. We're going from an 18% return on equity down to an 11%. Well, what was the big change there? We issued a lot of stock, and so this number changed significantly. Some of the other numbers changed, but if we were comparing two firms, it would be really interesting, two firms with the same return on equity, to see how they got there. And that's what DuPont analysis is all about. Let's do a couple more. So let's calculate earnings per share. That would be our net income divided by, I think we use basic shares for that, $1.68 a share, and then copy that forward. And basic earnings per share growth. So I'm going to copy it back one time so I can get a growth rate. And it looks like we're growing at about 4%. Except for that year where we issued so many shares. We had a similar amount of earnings, but a significant number of shares hit the market. So it was pretty dilutive to our earnings per share, although it kind of leveled out after that. So we had a big hit to earnings per share when we dumped all that stock on the market. If anybody's looking at our PE ratio, that may have had a negative effect on our stock price. We didn't worry too much about it. And there's a thing called compound annual growth to see how did we grow on an annual basis over this period. And so let's take the last value and the starting value, divide them, raise that to the exponent of 1 over the number of periods. And here again, I'm just going to cheat and say this minus this to get the number of periods. I think we need to take all of that minus 1. And it shows that because of that dilution, that we actually decreased our earnings per share at an average rate of 1.4% per year. Now on the next couple of ratios, we'll be looking at the balance sheet. So debt to equity. In this case, by debt, we actually mean total liabilities because we're looking at the makeup of our capitalization. So we'll look at total liabilities over total equities. And then here, we're looking at total liabilities over total capitalization. So we use the total liabilities and equities for that. And then here, where we're looking at enterprise value per EBITDA, this is a bit more performance. So where these are capital, I'm going to be using book values. And where this is a little bit more performance-based, I'm going to be using market value where possible. So let's go ahead and do our debt to equity. As I said, that's the average of our total liabilities over our total equities. So go up to the balance sheet, take the average of those total liabilities over the average of the total equities. And then for the next one, we'll take the average of the total liabilities over the average of the bottom line of the balance sheet. And I think I left a formula out, may have left it out, and left the parentheses out on the other one. Let me check. No, looks like it's good there. So we've got 1.48 and 1.6. And those are just measures of our capital structure. A couple of different ways to look at it. What percentage of our capital structure is made up with debt, and what is the ratio of the debt to the equity. Here again, debt. In that context, meaning total liabilities. And the one remaining ratio is called enterprise value per EBITDA. So it's a measure of how big is your firm relative to the amount of EBITDA that you're throwing off. And it happens to be the average market value of equity plus the average debt minus the average cash. So this is our equity plus our net debt. So if we think of the enterprise value as being debt plus equity, it's on a net basis, this is how we're going to calculate it. And since most of these are balance sheet type items, we're going to take the end of this year and average it with the end of last year. Since we're going to divide that whole thing by EBITDA, I'm going to set this formula up this way. So let's go take the average of the equities. So for equities, I'm going to come up here and grab the share count times the share price at the end of the year, comma, share count times the share price at the end of the year. This is not typically how you see an average formula, where we have two things multiplied, comma, two things multiplied, but it's just saying average the equity at the end of this year and the equity at the end of last year. And the math works, so try that out. To that, we want to add our debt In fact, we want to add our average debt and subtract our average cash so that we get the net debt, and then divide the whole thing by EBITDA from the income statement. And of course, we don't average that because this number already represents what happened across the entire year of 2020. And that gives us a ratio that we can copy forward. We have now calculated the free cash flow, discounted it, adjusted it for just the equity value, divided it by the share count to get our stock price forecast, our equity value per share. And then we looked at some important ratios and some common valuation ratios. Hope you've enjoyed the video.